He was not a monster in the way people imagine monsters. He did not lurk in shadows. He did not hunt people on dark streets. He knocked on doors. He introduced himself. He said he was interested in the item they were selling, or the apartment, or the educational kit listed on the grocery store bulletin board. He was polite, unremarkable, the kind of person you invite inside without a second thought. Between January 1995 and March 1997, Paul Runge killed at least 7 people across northern Illinois. 6 women, 1 10-year-old girl. He found them mostly through classified ads. He was not caught at the scene. He was not caught by a witness. He was not caught by an investigation that was closing in. He was caught because a DNA database, years later, matched a sample from a murdered child's body to a man already sitting in a cell for an unrelated violation. By then, he had been free for 2 full years while police suspected him, while the FBI watched him, while he continued to knock on doors. This is the story of Paul Runge, what he did, how he was found, and what the system that created him failed to prevent. Paul Runge grew up in Oak Forest, Illinois, suburb southwest of Chicago. Quiet streets, the kind of place no one writes about. He was 17 years old when his mother died. That same year, he lured a 14-year-old girl into his family's home. His father and younger brother were away fishing. He held her for 15 hours. When she escaped 15 hours later, she was still bound, handcuffed, gagged, and blindfolded. Her body was covered in bite marks. Knife wounds marked her arms. The handcuffs had left deep impressions on her wrists and ankles. He was sentenced to 14 years. He served 7. In May 1994, he walked out, got a job, moved cities. On paper, a man who had paid his debt and moved on. He was free for 8 months. Then Stacy Frobel came to visit his wife. She walked through the door. She was never seen alive again. The first body appeared in January 1995, 8 months after his release. It was found piece by piece, because Paul Runge had made sure the pieces were not easy to find. Paul Runge's method had 2 phases. The first was access. He needed to get inside, and he found a way to make strangers open their doors willingly. He read classified ads, newspaper listings, grocery store bulletin boards. Anywhere a person had advertised something for sale, a car, a house, sports equipment, a child's educational kit. He would call. He would seem interested. He would arrange a time, and when the door opened, he was inside before they understood what was happening. His first confirmed victim was Stacy Frobel, 25 years old, Carroll Stream, Illinois, January 3rd or 4th, 1995. She was not an ad. She was an acquaintance of Runge's wife, Charlene. She came to visit. She walked through the door. She was never seen alive again. Runge killed her with a dumbbell. He then dismembered her body in the bathtub using a saw. He scattered her remains across northern Illinois and into southern Wisconsin. 2 weeks later, on January 16th, a German shepherd named Friendly brought a severed human leg home to its owner. 5 days after that, the dog found the other one. DNA confirmed it was Stacy Frobel. 6 months later, July 11th, 1995. 2 sisters, Janetta and Amela Posenbegovic, 22 and 20 years old, Bosnian refugees. They had arrived in the United States 6 months earlier, fleeing a war. They were offered house cleaning work through a mutual acquaintance. They came to the Runge home in Glendale Heights. Their bodies have never been found. Runge later confessed to handcuffing them, torturing them, strangling them. Their dismembered remains were placed in garbage bags and left for collection. By 1997, Runge's method had evolved. He no longer needed Charlene as an intermediary. He had found something cleaner: classified ads. January 1997, Dorota Jubak, 30 years old. She had placed an ad to sell her house on Chicago's Northwest Side. Runge responded. He gained her trust. He got inside. Firefighters found her body when they extinguished the blaze he set on his way out. February 3rd, 1997. Yolanda Gutierrez, 35 years old. She had posted a notice on a grocery store bulletin board. She was selling a hooked-on phonics educational kit. She had a 10-year-old daughter, Jessica Muniz. Both of them were home. He bound them both. He tortured them for hours. He cut their throats. He set the apartment on fire. March 1997. Kazimira Peruk, 43 years old. She had advertised her condominium for sale. She was recently divorced. She was trying to move back to Poland. Runge came to view the property. Firefighters found her at the same way they had found Zubak. 7 confirmed victims. A knock at the door. An ordinary reason to be let in. The FBI had been watching Paul Runge since 1995. They had searched his home. They had found weapons, and they still could not touch him. Police had suspected Paul Runge from almost the beginning. He was the last person to see Stacy Frobel alive. He was connected to the Posenbegovic sisters through his wife. Investigators found the sisters' contact information written on a piece of paper in his garbage. But suspicion is not evidence, and evidence was exactly what they could not get. Between 1995 and early 1996, the FBI ran a full surveillance operation. They tapped his phones. They traced calls from payphones. They sifted through his garbage. They recruited a friend of Runge's, a woman named Dina Bartolini, to wear a wire. She raised the subject of Stacy Frobel every way she could think of. Runge said nothing. She later told investigators he was stone cold. On March 8, 1996, federal agents searched the Runge home with 2 other law enforcement agencies. They removed more than 200 items: a stun gun, a crossbow, a large hunting knife, a book about Charles Albright, a Dallas killer who mutilated his victims, a guide to monitoring police radio traffic. They could not make an arrest. The items were not enough to charge him with murder. While the investigation stalled, Runge was still free. January 1997, Dorota Zubak was killed. February, Yolanda Gutierrez and Jessica Muniz. March, Kazimira Peruk. 4 murders in 3 months, while under surveillance, while being watched, while the FBI waited for something they could use. In May 1997, investigators found weapons in his home, a parole violation. It was the only charge they had. Paul Runge was sent back to prison to serve out the remaining 7 years of his prior sentence. Not for 7 murders, for possession of a weapon. For 2 more years, the murders were officially unsolved. The Hasanbegovich sisters had not been found. Their families did not know what had happened to them. Then, in 1999, a forensic DNA database did what 2 years of federal surveillance could not. In 1999, while Runge was in prison for the parole violation, forensic scientists matched his DNA profile against unsolved case evidence. The match came back to the murder of Jessica Muniz, the 10-year-old girl. On June 7, 2001, Chicago police detective Frank Capitelli drove to the Will County Jail. He sat down across from Paul Runge. He told him nothing at first. He placed the Illinois State Police Crime Lab reports on the table between them. Runge denied everything. Then he looked at the reports. He looked at them for a long time. "You know I did it. You got me." He agreed to make a videotaped statement, and then he talked. He described the Hooked on Phonics bulletin board notice. He described going to the apartment on January 31st to look at the kit, then leaving. He described returning on February 3rd with duct tape and a knife in his coat pocket. He described what happened inside the apartment. He confessed to all 7 murders. In summer 2001, prosecutors charged Runge across Cook and DuPage counties. The trial began in January 2006, 9 years after the last murder. The prosecution played his videotaped confession in open court. Jurors watched Paul Runge, in his own words, describe what he had done to a woman and her daughter. Families of the victims watched from the gallery. The defense argued insanity, that Runge suffered from sexual sadism since childhood, that his mother's death had removed whatever had been holding it in check, that the acts were those of a mind that could not stop itself. The jury rejected it. February 2006, Paul Runge was convicted of the murders of Yolanda Gutierrez and Jessica Muniz. He was sentenced to death. Prosecutors called him the face of the death penalty. In 2011, Governor Pat Quinn abolished capital punishment in Illinois entirely. Paul Runge's death sentence was commuted to life without parole. He would live. Paul Runge is currently serving a natural life sentence at Pontiac Correctional Center, Illinois. He will not be released. He has never given a face-to-face media interview. In 2006, through his father, he submitted a written statement to the Daily Herald. "I don't let myself accept I'm guilty of these crimes. I feel bad about the pain I've caused, but the self-defense part of my brain doesn't let me identify the crimes with me. Without truly accepting my actions, there will be no equal amount of guilt and remorse. To fully accept and realize my actions would kill me." After his conviction, prosecutors and the families of his other victims decided together not to pursue the remaining murder charges, not because the evidence was weak, because no punishment greater than life without parole existed in Illinois. There was nothing left to add. The Hasanbegovich sisters have never been found. Janetta, Amela. They survived a war in Bosnia. They came to the United States. They were offered work. Their remains were placed in garbage bags and collected with the trash. 7 people were killed by a man the system had already identified as dangerous, had already convicted, had already released, had already watched for 2 years. He served half his sentence for the first rape. He was paroled into a city with no mechanism to account for what he had already shown himself to be. And for 2 years, while investigators gathered paper and traced phone calls and waited for something they could use in court, he found ads in a newspaper. He called. He knocked. The classified ads still exist. Different platforms, different formats, but the same transaction. A stranger, an address, a reason to open the door. Paul Runge was not invisible. He was not a ghost. He was a man the system had already met. It just didn't finish the conversation.